The 2010s was a very interesting time for Nintendo. There was a lot of turmoil within the company and dark ages for some of their series, but at the same time, they created a bunch of fun, brand new experimental IPs, primarily on the 3DS, they may or may not have played. As someone who was just 8 years old when the 3DS launched, this is a very nostalgic time for me that I love talking about, and if you're watching this, you probably like the 3DS too, so grab some popcorn and enjoy this hour-plus video on random Nintendo-published 3DS games from the 2010s. Back in 2015, Nintendo released an eShop exclusive called Nintendo Badge Arcade. It was a free game with a simple concept. It's an arcade where you get badges. Crazy, I know. You might remember how you could buy different backgrounds for your 3DS, like that wood grain Mario one, which was my personal favorite. Let me know in the comments which one you used. But then Nintendo decided to take things further. More customization with the badges. Some were simple icons, characters, items. Others could be combined into bigger designs, like this Majora's Mask Moon badge made of 4 pieces. 13-year-old me just spammed random badges all over the home screen with no rhyme or reason, except for this one random Mario vs. Donkey Kong section. They had tons of badges. Seemingly every Nintendo franchise you could think of showed up. Mario, Zelda, Animal Crossing, even third-party stuff like Mega Man made the cut. So you boot up the game and there's this pink rabbit waiting for you. But the game itself though, it's just a simple crane machine you've probably played in real life, but here it was actually easy to win. You didn't even have to directly grab badges, you could just hit them off and make other badges knock them down. It felt great, and after every round you tapped the prize in the slot to collect them, just like an actual arcade, and it was oddly satisfying. But then the catch. After your 5 freebies, the rabbit leans in and tells you 5 more plays for $1, which might sound cheap now, but for 2015, especially to a 7th grader, it felt like a fortune. Still, the thrill of collecting kept pulling you in. These badges felt like digital Pokemon cards or NFTs. Honestly, I'm surprised Nintendo didn't make their own NFTs in 2021. So you cough up the $1, now you get to pick your stage, and each one is themed around different games. Mario, obviously there. Splatoon, that was the big new game at the time, so that's covered. The settings menu icons, weirdly also there. Nintendo updated these stages almost daily, pushing new game launches or seasonal sets. It was like a box of chocolates. You never knew what you were gonna get. And it wasn't just the badges changing. Sometimes even the claw was swapped for a hammer or other goofy tools. The layouts varied too. Some easier than others depending on how badly they wanted you to spend. You could play smart and just go for the ones you wanted, or try to collect them all like some desperate Pokédex addict. And if you didn't get what you wanted, better toss another $1 in, right? Like a tiny slot machine with a just one more try carved into the side. You're gonna get the one you want, you just had to keep spending money. And this was a game aimed at kids. The ethics of the setup, very questionable. To be fair though, Nintendo wasn't even close to the worst offender when it came to microtransactions. Like at least it wasn't like $10 loot boxes or randomized gambling. $1, 5 plays, pretty fair deal that added up fast because it just didn't seem like much at all when it is just $1 at a time. But it could be a lot, especially for anyone trying to collect everything. There was an actual gold trophy for snagging 2,000 badges. 2,000. Let that number sink in. A couple years later, Fortnite would come out and charge $20 for certain skins, which by comparison makes it seem very light. So yeah, there were over 2,000 individual badges by the time the game stopped getting updates. Goombas, Wario, Splatoon squids, Wii Fit logos, you name it, it probably got a badge. Didn't get what you wanted, just come back next week. There'll be a new batch. It was basically an endless digital gacha machine baked right into your 3DS. And the thing is, it was fun. The physics were satisfying. Watching badges knock into each other was exciting. Sometimes you get 5 in one pull and get a big dopamine hit. And those practice plays that could randomly give you a free real play, just pure bliss. Like you were gaming Nintendo's rigged system, but of course you weren't. No one was. Just like the house, Nintendo always wins. And the rabbit, this pink amalgamation of pixels, knew exactly what he was doing. Every day he'd hit you with something new, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Squid Game salesman learned something from him. Wait a second, what's this? He'll be like, hey, want to try the new Splatoon badges? They're fresh today. Or he'll say something like, you're not spending $1? You sure? These old badges go away tomorrow. I don't even know if he actually said these things. It's just kind of what I remember. But it's like, chill. It's 2 a.m. and I just want to pick my badge. Don't make me reflect on whether I need to get the limited edition Tingle badge before it becomes lost media. Nintendo even gave this rabbit lore, like actual backstory. He dreamed of opening his own arcade someday. This job is just saving money for his future. I'm not kidding. People online felt bad for him, and some players literally spent dollars they didn't want to spend just to help the rabbit out. May I remind you, this is a video game character and not like an actual living, breathing thing. At least I sure hope not. Nintendo basically turned a pink bunny into a struggling small business owner and guilt-tripped their fan base into spending money, and of course it worked. And the badge selection was sometimes brilliant and also sometimes baffling. Sure, Mario and Zelda made sense, but who in their right mind needed badges of the music player icon or the settings cogwheel? Apparently I did. Then there were limited time badges, which were the worst. You log in and see a rare Fire Emblem set that's leaving in 2 days and panic because you're broke until Friday when you get your weekly allowance. And don't even get me started on the puzzle badges, the ones that form full dioramas. Like the Majora's Mask Moon I mentioned earlier. Miss one piece and congrats, it's incomplete. And sometimes you'd have to wait months for something to rotate back. For the completionists out there, this game probably broke them. Let's talk real money for a second, because I mentioned this before, but to put it in perspective, $1 for 5 plays sounds fine until you realize most sets took like 10 to 20 plays to finish. So that's $4, $5, $10 just for tiny digital decorations. No gameplay value, no resale, just something to add to your 3DS home screen. Looking at the state of gaming now, that may even be worth it, because if Nintendo re-released this today, it would probably be like $1 per spin. And yet we paid for it. Nintendo almost certainly made money off this weird little game, and I get why. It was a really smart idea. They monetized the 3DS menu, like the actual system interface. Remember, this was on top of the wallpapers, which you could also buy. Nintendo also tossed you free daily plays, special holiday gifts, anniversary bonuses if you didn't care about completing every set. It was enough to keep you logging in and thinking about spending. And for kids, Playground Clout Wars over who had the gold Mario badge were a thing, kind of like Pokemon cards. Nah, I'm just kidding. We were just seeing who can make the most popular Mario Maker level at the time. Anyway, Badge Arcade was one giant ad machine. New Fire Emblem game coming, new badges, new Splatoon update. You'd see the crane set go, oh cool, maybe I'll try that game. And then it's free marketing wrapped in microtransactions. Nintendo ended new badge updates in 2017, so there's no new content anymore. The rabbit gave a weirdly heartfelt goodbye speech, thanked the players, hoped he'd see us again someday. And for a pink badge selling bunny, it was kind of hard. The game lingered after that, but the content well was dry. When the 3DS eShop closed in March 2023, you couldn't buy plays or log in for daily bonuses anymore. Then in April 2024, when 3DS online services shut down entirely, Badge Arcade went dark for real. But the fans of course didn't forget this. YouTube videos cataloging every badge, modded 3DS systems unlocking every set, complete collections preserved like strange relics. Like archaeologists in the future will dig up 3DSs with these badges and put them in museums. And if you really think about it, Nintendo Badge Arcade became nostalgia. Think about it, in 2015 there was no battle passes yet, there was no Fortnite skins, no live service everything. Nintendo was ahead of the curve monetizing customization before it was normal, and they did it on a dedicated handheld instead of a phone, which was really something else for the time. Compared to today's cash grabs, it felt kind of harmless. Like there was no pay to win, there was no real pressure, it was just fun little decorations. Yeah, it was manipulative, but it was charming in like the weird old prize machines at Chuck E. Cheese way. The Switch 2 has no menu customization yet, but imagine Badge Arcade HD, like modern badges, the Majora's Mask Moon back, along with some of the other fan favorites. Admit it, you'd probably play it. I feel like the 3DS just felt very personal in a way the Switch never has. Like it had themes, badges, music. The Switch just gives you the same boring black or white menus. So maybe Badge Arcade was pointless, maybe it was genius, but for a while it made your 3DS feel more like yours, and that's more than I expected from a rabbit selling digital stickers. And funnily enough, Nintendo Badge Arcade wasn't the first time they tried to guilt trip you into spending real money through a cartoon animal with a sad backstory on the 3DS. That honor belongs to a retired baseball dog named Rusty Slugger. Real quick, just want to say, if you're enjoying listening to me yap about niche 3DS games, and you're a huge 3DS fan like myself, consider subscribing to let me know you want more content like this. Nintendo released Rusty's Real Deal Baseball in Japan in 2013 and brought it to North America in 2014. It was a collection of baseball minigames, which on the surface may not sound that interesting, but more notably, you didn't just simply buy this game or pay for mission packs or anything like that. You would haggle with Rusty, the owner of the sports shop featured, and try to purchase the different games for the lowest price possible. Let's back up though, and see what exactly this game is and how you can start arguing with an NPC over real world money. I found this game randomly one night on the eShop, and as a baseball fan, I downloaded it since it was free and I wanted to see what it had to offer. Immediately after opening the game, you're introduced to Rusty Slugger, a retired baseball player operating a struggling sports shop. His shop is failing, his wife left, and now he's stuck raising 10 puppies by himself. Nintendo really need to think of a sad backstory for this guy. Where have I heard that one before? Anyway, after you go into Rusty's sports shack and talk for a bit, he'll give you a donut, and why a dog has a chocolate donut, I don't know. The reason he gives you this is because sugary foods get customers to open their wallets. Talking to Rusty a little more, you learn how he invested all his money into baseball video games sold by Nintendo. Not Nintendo, which Rusty mentions fixed his sync last year, because Nintendo makes the world's best baseball games. Nintendo Powers magazine rated the games 9 out of 10 bananas, and then Rusty starts going on about being able to play games on a 3DS, which really starts to break the fourth wall. That is until he gives you the best console of all time, the Nintendo 4DS. He then cries about having to watch his 10 kids alone now that his wife is away, and asks if you can watch one of them. If you accept, you need to choose one, and they all have such varied names. And what do you get for watching a stranger's kid? A free demo, and you take the demo and whichever pup you chose back to your house, plug in your 4DS, and get transported into the game world. The first game is Bat and Switch, which is a pretty standard batting practice game. The first stage is really easy, but it gets more difficult as you go on. There are 10 stages with 5 levels each, so 50 total. You also collect stamps as you complete challenges. The better you do, the higher rating you'll get. Gold, silver, and bronze for each challenge. After you do the demo challenges and get a few items like a donut, wig, and hair trimmer, you go outside and learn about StreetPass mode. I actually never personally used this, but it could let you unlock some things. The game also had a stamp book, which I finished 9 pages of, and different cosmetic items you could wear to give completionists more to do. You walk back into the store, and Rusty and one of his kids start telling you how you can buy more for real money, and that sales tax won't be factored in. Breaking the fourth wall once again, are we? And remember the donut from before? You can give it to Rusty and he'll get all excited. But like I said, this is a chocolate donut. He's a dog. Did no one at Nintendo, or I'm sorry, Nintendo, notice this? Not only that, but you also need to give him a nose hair trimmer before he finally offers you $1 off the $4 price tag. After some more haggling, you can get it down to $2, but Rusty won't go lower than that. Then you're taken to the eShop purchase page and fork over the $2. You also start to learn more about Rusty's backstory, as this is part of episode 1. And yeah, I forgot to mention that this isn't just a series of mini games, but it ties into a larger story divided by episodes. So this story is actually deeper than a couple Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi games, because there actually is a real narrative here, like I mentioned. Like, it gets deeper than just the first episode. The first episode does wrap up with Rusty feeling a tiny bit better about himself now that he's sold you a game and fed his children dinner that wasn't just their tears. However, shortly into episode 2, his cookware gets destroyed and dinner is a mess. The next game you can unlock is Cage Match, and no, it's not wrestling, though that would be hilarious for a baseball game. It's hitting baseballs in a batting cage, and it reminds me of this one FanDuel game where you battle against other players trying to hit the ball at targets. The game is pretty simple, and the pitching machine throws pitches about as fast as a Little Leaguer, so it's not very difficult. Honestly, this one wasn't my favorite because it felt pretty clunky and just never really hooked me like some other games did. After this, it's back to the haggling table. Rusty wants to take a cooking class so he can properly feed his kids, but to do that, you need to buy the next game, which is Quick Catch. The haggling for this goes on for a while. You need to compliment him and give him a wig before you can get the lowest price possible. The rock bottom price here is $1.80, so over half off, which isn't too shabby. Before we get to the next game though, these cartoon frames show that the cooking class didn't exactly go as planned for Rusty, but too bad for him, we have a game to play. Quick Catch is one of my favorites in this collection, especially towards the later levels where the ball is hit harder and has more spin on it. You just use a circle pad to move your glove and catch line drives, which is very simple, but it did enough to keep me engaged. After you've played enough of Quick Catch, it's back to Rusty for episode 4. Feeling depressed because of his cooking class failures, things get even worse when a truck goes through his door. This guy just can't catch a break, can he? Fortunately for you, Rusty doesn't get too worked up over this and gives you a free demo called Make the Call. This isn't needed for the story though, so I'll get to that a little later. The next game you'll play for the story is Field a Glove, which is obviously another fielding game. You can haggle Rusty down to $1.70 for this, so an even better price than the last one. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but haggling can take a ridiculous amount of time. Rusty will go on, and you'll have to answer multiple questions, give multiple items, and it still won't be over. Once you finally get through all the dialogue, you'll be able to start Field a Glove. All you do is field ground balls and fly balls by moving your circle pad or tilting your 3DS. As you progress, you'll even play some levels where you move from side to side and can jump and dive. This game is alright, but it's not the most memorable. More memorable though is Rusty, who we spent too much time away from. Once you begin episode 5 and still see the frames that tell the story, you'll see Rusty digging through the rubble in the shop and finding a hint about his wife's secret activities. Well, you find out what it is very soon. It's his wife's wedding collar with a note saying she's just off to visit her sister for a few weeks. So you're telling me that in this world, they have a console that will bring you into the game world, but they don't have phones. Rusty could never have just, I don't know, called his wife at any point to ask where she was. And Rusty's wife, who has 10 kids at home, never once called him or any of her 10 kids to check up on them. Just awful parenting. After a whole lot of dialogue and Rusty telling you about wanting to close the shop, you can get the game Make the Call, where you play as an umpire. You could probably play this for like 5 minutes and be better than half the umpires in Major League Baseball. Before we see where Rusty's story goes, he rents out the shop and goes to celebrate with the new owner, only to find out it's his wife. So not only did his wife disappear for weeks without calling, but now she just rented property from her husband without him finding out somehow. These two seem to have some serious communication issues. Before I get to the ending here, let's talk about the remaining games. There's the aim game where you play as a pitcher and a hitter and try to aim the ball in certain spots, and it's kind of like Cage Match but has more variety. Then there's Drop and Pop, which tests your reflexes like quick time events, and if I remember correctly, this was actually one of my favorites. Each tire has a different button you need to press when it comes down, and the faster and more accurate you are, the higher the score. It gets considerably more difficult in the later levels when you not only have to worry about the letters, but the D-pad as well. This was a really fun one to do the high score derby for, which is just trying to get the highest score possible instead of just trying to get a badge. You can also see what other people online got for their high scores, which was a cool feature. Another one of my favorites was Volley Bats, where you control 2 players and have to hit a ball back and forth like you're rallying in volleyball. Besides being something that would be fun in real life if you used a beach ball instead of a baseball, this was just a creative mode that showed its full potential when juggling is introduced in later levels. It can get really chaotic when the ball is moving faster and you need to worry about multiple balls, and this is also an unofficial 2-player mode if one person holds the right side of the 3DS and the other one holds the left. Gear Games is another non-traditional mode where you go from balancing a ball on your bat by tilting your 3DS to clean a dirty glove on the touchscreen. The glove mode was kind of mad to me, but the balancing mode could be really fun, especially if you're just going for a high score. And then the final game is Batmaster, and I think I remember this one the most vividly. You take a piece of lumber and use it to make your own bat, and you get to customize the shape, color, and design, and then try to set the record for the furthest hit ball. I remember trying to make different bats to break my record, and apparently my furthest hit ball was 634 feet, which isn't too bad if I say so myself. You can even use your custom bat in other game modes, which was a really nice touch. Now on to the final parts of the story. You meet Mitzi Slugger, who's Rusty's wife and the new shopkeeper. You learn a little bit about her and how she wants to keep Rusty's dream alive. Little did she know how depressed she made him by running away for a few weeks, but after buying a game for $1, you get to the final episode storyline where they all live happily ever after. The pup you chose at the beginning goes back to spend time with you after returning briefly home, and that's Rusty's real deal, baby. baseball. I used to always think it was weird how there were set prices for these games and how you could haggle to get lower prices, and it definitely is weird, but there are people out there who paid full price when they didn't need to. To be fair, the game makes it very obvious when you could get a lower price and tries very hard to give you the best deal, so it's kind of on you if you choose to pay more. But if you do ignore the game's warnings and pay full price, a mysterious character called Pappy Van Poodle steps in and gives Rusty the items you would have earned through haggling. Pappy became this weird Nintendo deep cut because he only exists in this one game, and most people didn't even see him. He was a character people didn't know about for a few years after this game. Because think about it, if you played the game the right way and haggled to get the lowest prices, that would be $16 for everything, but to pay full price would be $40, and in 3DS money, that was a lot. But I guess it gives us one of the most interesting characters Nintendo's ever made. So since this game, we haven't really seen much of Rusty. He had a cameo in Smash along with his Japanese counterpart, but he'll forever be a relic of this era of Nintendo where they were just churning out these gimmicky digital games. Honestly, love to see a new version of this on Switch 2 with updated minigames, and just let us relive the simpler times. And while Rusty and the Arcade Bunny were busy parting you from your allowance, there was something else happening on the 3DS that entire time. Something Nintendo built over years that to this day is one of the most popular things on the 3DS. So I think we're all in agreement that StreetPass was one of the 3DS's best features. You'd carry your 3DS around outside and then would see a green light assuming you passed a fellow 3DS user. Many games had small StreetPass features, but none took advantage of it as much as StreetPass Meet Plaza. So what made this game, or rather collection of games, so special? It wasn't necessarily the games on their own, although they were fun in their own right, but it was just the novelty of having a real person to meet show up on your 3DS. Not only that, but it was someone you passed in real life. Maybe it was a friend, maybe it was some completely random person you didn't know and would never meet, but you would forever be connected by StreetPass. Let's back up though and see how this worked. After you boot up the software and go to the gate, you'll be greeted by anyone who came across your path and learn a few things about them. What state or country they're from, their birthday, what they've been playing, and even custom messages after you've already met them. If you're around my age, you played this in middle school and probably got a lot of the same people showing up if you brought your 3DS to school. I vividly remember sometimes seeing the same me showing up in Meet Plaza who I didn't know, only to end up meeting them at a later point and realizing it was them. It was honestly just a really cool way to connect with people. After you've greeted everyone, you'll go to the plaza itself. There you can see every single person you ever met via StreetPass, as well as maps to see how many states or countries you've StreetPass someone from. You also had a calendar so you could see birthdays Mii's in your plaza had. Each Mii there would also have their own tag so you could see some info about them, as well as when you tag them and how many times. If you really want to have an existential crisis, go into your Mii Plaza and see how many Mii's have been there for over a decade now. That Mii got your 3DS when you were a kid whose biggest responsibility was homework, and now you work full-time paying bills, so yeah, it's depressing. A little background first. So StreetPass Meet Plaza launched with the 3DS in 2011 with two games, Puzzle Swap and Find Me. Find Me 2 was actually added in a free update a few months later, and these were Nintendo's proof of concept games, and they were surprisingly addictive for being what were essentially bonus features. But Nintendo didn't stop there. In 2013, they released an update that added 4 new purchasable games: Mii Force, Flower Town, Warrior's Way, and Monster Manor. This was when the 3DS really started to get more popular, and the Plaza went from a novelty with a couple minigames to a full-on game platform that encouraged you to go outside, walk around, and constantly check your 3DS. Then in 2015, Nintendo added 2 more with Ultimate Angler and Battleground Z, and just when you thought they were done, they added 5 more in 2016. Slot Car Rivals, Market Crashers, Ninja Launcher, Feed Me, and Mii Trek. The 2016 update also expanded the gate so you could hold up to 100 StreetPass hits instead of just 10, which was a game changer if you lived near a city, went to school, or maybe went to a convention. So let's talk about the games. Puzzle Swap may seem like a simple concept at first glance, but it was one of the most addictive and universally loved parts of the Meet Plaza. The premise was straightforward: collect puzzle pieces by streetpassing other 3DS users and slowly complete large mosaics of Nintendo-themed artwork. Each puzzle featured iconic characters and franchises, from Mario and Zelda to more lesser-known stuff like Xenoblade or Kid Icarus. What made it so compelling was that not all the pieces were equal. The regular pieces were common and could be traded freely, but the rare pink pieces, you could only get them from people who already had them, and you couldn't buy them with play coins. Maybe someone at school had that one missing corner of the Luigi's Mansion puzzle. Maybe your friend somehow got it from bringing his 3DS to a baseball game because he was a nerd and couldn't go anywhere without it. I vividly remember talking with some friends about this game to try and get some pieces for puzzles I was close to finishing. The excitement of opening the gate and seeing a Mii carrying the exact piece you needed was just a thrill few modern games can replicate. Puzzle Swap basically turned the world into a scavenger hunt, but the true charm was in the payoff, because once you finally completed a puzzle, the image would animate in 3D and you could tilt your 3DS to admire the scene like a diorama. It actually felt like something you earned through real world movement and human interaction, and it really showed how a simple game could be so addicting. Find Me was the Plaza's first attempt at turning StreetPass into a full-fledged adventure game. The concept was basically an old school fantasy RPG where your Mii gets kidnapped and locked in a dungeon, and the only way to rescue yourself is by recruiting other Miis you meet in real life to fight on your behalf. Each Mii that showed up could attack enemies or use magic, and their shirt color dictated what kind of magic they could cast. Red Miis cast fire spells, blue Mii's cast water, white Mii's illuminated dark rooms, yellow Mii's created sandstorms that could clear out poison gas, and it was an extremely simplified fantasy RPG, except your party was made up of people you knew in real life as well as random strangers. The real genius of Find Me wasn't in the gameplay itself, but in how it made you crave those daily street passes. You never knew what color you were going to get or what obstacle was coming next. Maybe you were stuck in a dark room and desperately needed a white Mii, or maybe a room full of fire immune enemies was wrecking your team and you need a blue Mii's water magic to handle them. I'd be lying if I said I didn't check some of my friends' favorite colors to see if they had what I needed and then try to street pass with them. Then there was Find Me 2, which took everything that worked in the original and expanded it. It added branching paths, more difficult enemies, secret areas, and multiple new endings. You can now use play coins to hire stronger Mii's or even call back previous heroes who had already leveled up. The sense of progression felt more meaningful, and the customization options, especially unlocking silly hats and gear for your Mii, gave you more reason to keep playing. I can still remember finally rescuing my Mii's after months of slow, steady street passing, and this was also so popular, it prompted Nintendo to make a full game in Miitopia, which released on the 3DS and later the Switch. Mii Force was easily one of the most overlooked yet mechanically rich games in the Plaza. It was a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up like Gradius or R-Type, but with a Nintendo twist. Every Mii you street pass turned into a weapon module on your ship. Their shirt color determined the weapon type. One might give you a laser, another a homing shark, another a spread shot, and you'd arrange them around your ship across 4 directional slots, 3 in front and 1 in the rear, with additional Mii's powering up the weapons when slotted behind them. The more street pass tags, the more firepower you'd have going into a level. If you passed 6 or 7 people that day, you'd be loaded up with firepower, fly through levels in a chaotic storm of lasers and bombs, and if you passed only one person, you were probably in trouble. I remember so clearly trying to beat a boss with just one weapon, timing every shot and praying for more Mii's tomorrow. The fact that this was a bonus game tucked into a free app is kind of wild in retrospect. For me, Mii Force was a sleeper hit that made you want to go out and explore, not just to collect Mii's, but to build the perfect loadout for your next mission. When I first saw Flower Town, I didn't think much of it. It seemed like a boring gardening game, but Flower Town was actually the most calming and meditative experience the 3DS had to offer. On paper, you could see why I thought it would be boring. You're a gardener whose goal is to grow and crossbreed every flower species in the land, but once you've started, it became weirdly addictive. Each Mii you pass could help pollinate your flowers, and depending on their flowers' traits, you get a brand new hybrid, some common, some incredibly rare. There were over 80 unique species to discover and plenty of decorative planters, landscaping, and furniture to unlock as you leveled up your garden. It sort of felt like Animal Crossing in miniature form. You check in each day to water your plants, maybe get lucky with a hybrid, and see your little garden flourish over time. And then there was Mr. Mendel, your guide in this game. He cheered your progression, gave advice, and generally made you feel like you were doing something meaningful. There's even a mall where you could buy supplies to make your garden better, and middle school me loved this game for whatever reason. Warrior's Way was Nintendo's take on military conquest, except instead of managing troops with spreadsheets and war tables, your soldiers were just Mii's you walk past at the mall. Every time you got a street pass, that Mii added their soldiers to your growing army. From there, you'd set out to conquer other monarchs' territories in what was essentially a giant stylized rock, paper, scissors game. Infantry beats archers, archers beat cavalry, cavalry beats infantry. It was war, but it was a Nintendo game. It didn't feel too serious. What made Warrior's Way so compelling was just the satisfaction of watching your numbers grow. There was nothing like passing someone and seeing your army shoot up by like 4,000 troops. There was also nothing more frustrating than walking around all day to get one tag and gain like 300 soldiers. But the game encouraged long-term commitment, and each new battle required not just strength and numbers, but also prediction of what your opponent was going to use. It was also fun when you'd actually battle other Street Pass monarchs and then take in their troops after. This is probably my favorite of all the Street Pass Mii Plaza games. Monster Manor was arguably the deepest and most atmospheric game in the entire Plaza. It combined elements of puzzle solving, dungeon crawling, and RPG gear collection, all within a spooky, haunted mansion. Every time you got a Street Pass, you'd receive a room piece shaped like a Tetris block. You then place it on a grid to explore new rooms, find treasure chests, and encounter ghosts or monsters. Placing similarly colored tiles adjacent to each other created larger rooms with better loot and stronger enemies, so you had to think carefully about every placement. As you went up each floor, the enemies got harder and more unpredictable. You'd collect guns, swords, and magical gadgets, and upgrading these weapons became essential for survival. Some of the bosses were actually tough, and reaching higher floors without enough room tiles felt like you were in a Souls game. Monster Manor had this cozy but creepy tone that felt like Luigi's Mansion's cousin. This also wouldn't be the last time Mii Plaza had some horror type environment. Ultimate Angler turned fishing into one of the most captivating and content-rich experiences in the Mii Plaza. Each Street Pass gave you different types of bait, and you use that bait to go fishing on over 20 different islands, each with its own unique fish population, scenery, and gear requirements. You started off catching little guppies and crabs, but eventually worked your way up to giant mythical sea monsters that required upgraded rods, special bait combinations, and a bit of luck. You'd head out with a party of Mii's, cast your line, reel in some common catches, and hope for a rare find. You can unlock better rods, expand your fishing grounds, and fill out your fish encyclopedia like a Pokédex. And when you finally caught one of those massive legendary fish, some of which took days to even get a nibble, felt like striking gold. Ultimate Angler somehow made me excited to fish with complete strangers, and that's a sentence I never thought I'd say unironically. Remember I mentioned there would be another horror game? Well, here it is. Battleground Z dropped you into a small town during a zombie outbreak, and your only hope for survival was the hobbies of strangers. Every Mii you passed brought a weapon to the fight based on what they'd said in their Mii profile. Music lovers gave you guitars, fitness buffs gave you barbells, foodies handed you frying pans. The gameplay was a mix of action and strategy, where you used those ridiculous tools to fend off zombies in different areas of town. You never knew what kind of weapon you were going to get until you street pass someone, and that meant that each run felt different. Sometimes you go in fully loaded with the ranged weapons and cruise through the level. Other times you get stuck with a tote bag for a weapon because whoever you street passed apparently didn't have a listed hobby and you just had to make it work. But yeah, this game was sort of absurd. Underneath all the goofy weapons and The Walking Dead, there was a surprising amount of depth here. Some weapons were better in certain environments, and managing your stamina became key during later levels. The game even had boss fights, cutscenes, and unlockables that kept things interesting. Battlegrounds Z basically took the idea of street pass personalization and just ran with it, and it was one of the most fully developed games in the Plaza as an actual game. So when I think of Street Pass meet Plaza, those are the games that I think of. However, there were 5 more games released in 2016. Slot Car Rivals was surprisingly intense. At first glance, it looked like a stripped-down Mario Kart with tiny toy cars. You'd race against other Miis on simple plastic tracks, trying to get the fastest times while managing boost, corners, and gravity-defying loop-de-loops. But once you started playing, it was clear this was less about raw speed and more about precision and split-second timing. Your only real control was the throttle, and that one mechanic somehow made or break your entire race. Every track had a pattern to be memorized and mastered more than a true racing game. Market Crashers was probably the weirdest of the Street Pass games, but that's kind of what made it so memorable. This was Nintendo's attempt at making a stock trading simulator, except instead of graphs and terminals, you got cartoon Miis shouting financial advice. You'd use tips from Street Pass Miis to decide whether to buy or sell stocks from wacky companies like toy manufacturers or banana moguls. A Mii's reaction, whether they were sweating, smiling, or panicking, would help you guess whether a stock would rise or plummet. It was part logic, part guesswork, and part reading facial expressions like you were playing LA Noire. Market Crashers also secretly taught you real financial concepts: diversification, risk management, supply and demand. There was something kind of brilliant about giving kids a crash course in economics through their 3DS. Feed Me was one of those games that sounded bizarre on paper, but totally clicked once you played it. You ran a fantasy-themed restaurant for adventurers, and they'd come in after a long day of fighting dragons, and your job was to cook them meals based on the ingredients Street Pass Miis brought with them. Think like Diner Dash, but with Miis. Some dishes were obvious, like meat and spicy stew, but others kind of felt like culinary puzzles. There were hundreds of ingredients and recipes, and discovering a new one kind of reminds me of Breath of the Wild in a way. Ninja Launcher is probably the most purely chaotic game in the Plaza lineup, and I mean that in the best way possible. You load your Mii into a giant cannon and launch yourself at targets, bouncing off walls and collecting coins along the way. Every Mii you street pass gave you more power, better trajectory angles, and extra abilities. The more Miis you had, the further and fast you could fly. Watching me rocket through the sky like a caffeinated bowling pin just never got old. And then there was Mii Trek, which was like a charming little Indiana Jones simulator. You played as an explorer venturing into uncharted jungles accompanied by Miis you street pass who acted as your teammates. Each Mii added stamina, tools, or supplies, and together you travel across a grid of wilderness, collect rare artifacts, and start to chart new areas. You could even display your finds in a museum setting, which gave you progression and a nice set of permanents. Street Pass Me Plaza probably will never come back in any form, and it's pretty sad. Some simple games created so many memories for so many people, and I remember Miis from school showing up at my Plaza before I knew who they were, eventually meeting them, and realizing someone I saw every day had been silently street passing me for months without either of us knowing. That required the hardware, the habit, the physically being near another person. Like, that's not stuff you can just patch in. Something I also didn't mention was that there was Nintendo's own hotspots at locations like McDonald's, where the last few people who brought their 3DS there would kind of like stay in the cloud or whatever, so if you went there, even if they were gone, you would still street pass them. And it's things like that that just added to Street Pass Me Plaza. So the Plaza is still there, you can still play these games if you had them, but you can never really recreate that moment of time where you played these games. Like if you ever want to just go through memory lane, look at your Street Pass Me Plaza and just reminisce about the different puzzles you completed, about the different Miis you met. And it's bittersweet, because on one hand, I doubt we'll ever get anything like this again, but it's also fun to just reminisce about this. So Street Pass Me Plaza was one of the earliest digital games Nintendo made on 3DS, but another one that also came out pretty early was Pushmo. During the 3DS era, Nintendo was experimenting a lot with new digital-only IPs. I already talked about a couple of them and have quite a few more to go, but also I just want to say that some of these games like Street Pass Me Plaza are incredibly well remembered, but some are a little more niche. From 2011 to 2015, Intelligent Systems, who you may know from the Paper Mario series and Fire Emblem, made 4 games in a series called Pushmo. They were quirky puzzle games where you manipulated blocks in different ways to push the goal. And I'm going to take a look at the entire series: Pushmo, Crashmo, Pushmo World, and Stretchmo, and just what made this niche and seemingly forgotten series so unique. Pushmo hits that sweet spot where anyone can pick it up, but only the most determined will fully conquer it. Released in December 2011 on the Nintendo 3DS eShop for just $6.99, which can't even get you a Big Mac in a lot of places anymore. Pushmo was one of Nintendo's earliest digital exclusive first-party titles. Felt like they were quietly testing the waters, making a new digital IP. Before this, Nintendo's digital stores were used more for Virtual Console, and maybe a few short games here and there. The game is set in Pushmo Park, a vibrant pastel-colored area filled with relaxing music and playgrounds. There's no epic lore like Rusty's Real Deal Baseball, no dark secret waiting at the end, just a bunch of kids who got stuck inside giant block puzzles somehow. Papa Blocks, your mentor and resident bearded block wizard, tasked with getting them out. You take control of the protagonist Mallow, no, not Mallow from Super Mario RPG, and you start doing puzzles. Pushmo's brilliance lies in its really simple mechanic. Each colored block can be pulled out up to 3 units towards you. You can climb on any surface as long as there's a ledge to land on. You can push blocks back in, but only from the front. No fancy sidestepping, no jumping tricks. There's a couple other things here, like manhole covers you can go through to basically teleport, and switches that automatically move blocks. But what Intelligent Systems does with it is what really made this a cult classic. The game starts off with basic puzzles, flat staircases, simple shapes that are too easy, and it kind of stays that way for sometimes you learn the mechanics. And then as time goes on, then the game really starts to get complex. The difficulty curve in Pushmo is one of the best I've seen in any puzzle game. Each level introduces new ideas to keep the game from getting stale. Rear axis ladders you need to use in clever ways, blocks you can't pull unless others are moved first, sequences where you have to build your own staircase using cleverly staggered heights, traps where pulling a block too far means you block yourself off entirely. You learn through doing and through failing very often. There's this one puzzle shaped like a house that seems easy, but the chimney is one block too tall to reach, unless you realize you can't just climb from the front. You have to climb up through the back using a barely visible ladder and pulling blocks from a different perspective. The game is training your brain to think in 3D without needing you to actually play in 3D, since none of us were actually doing that. Since this was an early 3DS game, it's pretty clear Nintendo really wanted to take advantage of the technology, but I mean, we all know how that turned out. Later puzzles introduce manholes that warp you across the puzzle. Now you're starting to plan around jumps, portals, and repositioning too. It starts to kind of feel like a kid's version of Portal. Around halfway through the game, you start unlocking puzzles shaped like Nintendo characters. Mario, Peach, Samus, Link, Donkey Kong. These aren't just for show. Like, they're actual climbing puzzles crafted with care. Like, you can spend a lot of time on these just to see how clever the devs were with hiding what you needed. Like in the Goomba puzzle where the secret lies in his unibrow. These puzzles are honestly my favorite. They take fan favorite characters and use them for 3D puzzles, which I always thought was really cool. So you may be wondering, what if you mess something up? In Pushmo, there's no live system, no time limit, no game over. You make a mistake, you rewind. You can rewind a single step or hold the button to rewind 100 moves. It's very seamless and smooth, and it encourages experimentation. Who knows, maybe Mario Kart World took inspiration from this. There are so many puzzles where you could get stuck, leave, come back, and stare at it for 10 minutes, try something ridiculous, and it would just work. Then there's Pushmo Studio, the level creator. This wasn't some tacked on bonus, like this was a full-blown creation engine. You could draw pixel art on a grid, assign block depths, test the level, and then publish it as a QR code. Suddenly, Pushmo became infinite like Mario Maker would end up being. The community for this was incredible. People were uploading puzzles shaped like Pokémon, third-party characters, game logos. You'd find a Charizard that took 30 minutes to climb. With a game this small of a community, that was really impressive. The QR code system, while fun, felt outdated though, even in 2011. An in-game browser would have made Pushmo a proper online platform instead of needing to get these codes in person or look them up online. Pushmo is just a relaxing game. Like, there's a comfort to it. Even when the puzzles get hard, it never feels hostile. Mallow doesn't even break the fourth wall and yell at you. Pop-up blocks isn't judging, unless he secretly does. The game just waits for you to figure out, and it's a very rewarding game. So if Pushmo was a stroll in a colorful park, Crashmo released just a year later in 2011 for just $7.99, and it felt like stepping into a Rubik's Cube that had somehow come alive and was now judging how smart you were. Pushmo, but with training wheels ripped off. You're once again Mallow, back for more heroic puzzle climbing. The puzzle style blocks have been replaced by Crashmo structures, and they're strange freestanding stacks of blocks that no longer lock into place. Now they fall with gravity. Think like Jenga, if Jenga was a logic puzzle and the blocks wanted you to suffer just a little bit. The goal is still to reach the top of the structure, but everything else is different. You're solving spatial domino effects. Every pull, every push, every move sends blocks sliding and crashing down. Crashmo is basically about deconstruction. You're constantly asking yourself, if I move this piece, what else is going to collapse? Every block is subject to gravity and will fall straight down if unsupported. You have to think not only about how to reach the top, but how to build a structure that will still exist long enough for you to get there. One of my favorite zones was the one that introduced floating balloons. They added a surreal element to the physics. Suddenly, blocks could be suspended in air, but were still subject to gravity the moment they were moved. These puzzles almost felt like sleight of hand. Then there were switch blocks, which could open and close platforms remotely, like something straight out of Zelda, except now you had to activate them in a specific order while maneuvering the blocks. The rewind mechanic came back, and in Crashmo, you're going to be using it more than your PlayStation Portal. You'll move something and then things will crash down in completely unexpected ways. It very much feels like Pushmo, but the physics turn it into a completely different game. Crashmo is significantly more difficult than its predecessor, and it may have fewer levels at only 100 compared to Pushmo's 250, but trust me, you're going to spend a lot more time on each one so it evens out. Crashmo Studio also returns, so it's pretty much infinite content. It's a much slower game. You'll spend far more time thinking and rewinding than actually climbing. Critically, it actually holds an 85 in Metacritic, and among fans was a bit divisive. Some absolutely loved the increased challenge, and others bounced off the difficulty curve and missed the lighter tone of the original. By the time 2014 rolled around, Pushmo and Crashmo had cemented themselves as cult classics on the 3DS. So naturally, Nintendo decided to bring Mallow to HD, and Pushmo World was born. It released on the Wii U, and being on a much more powerful console, looked worlds better and really did the colorful art style justice. Pushmo World was not a radical reinvention. It's basically like a spiritual remake of the first game with shinier graphics, fresh puzzles, some new mechanics, and a much needed improved online component. But that doesn't mean it wasn't great. Visually, Pushmo World popped. The bright, blocky levels are clean and vibrant on the Wii U hardware. Everything had this soft, plastic, almost toy-like aesthetic. The puzzles once again escalated from relaxing to wishing you were doing something else due to how difficult they got, while also not being able to give up. A few new features changed things up just enough. There were link blocks that move multiple disconnected blocks at the same time blocks that move back after a certain amount of time, and yin and yang blocks that move in other blocks as you move one out. One of the best additions was the World Pushmo Fair, an online hub for custom puzzles. Finally, a proper way to browse and download levels from other players without having to scan QR codes one at a time like a grocery store cashier. This felt like the closest the series ever got to a Mario Maker moment. Like, you could jump into a dozen of puzzles uploaded by players around the world, rate them, and even favorite creators. But it was still on the Wii U, and the Wii U, let's just say it didn't exactly have a long line outside the door for it. Pushmo World most likely didn't sell very well, which is sad considering its affordable price at just $10. The World's Pushmo Fair servers are also gone now, and the game almost nobody played had the best version of the thing that made the series special. I feel like it's the Wii U experience summed up completely. And then finally, we have Stretchmo, or Full Blocks if you're in Europe or Japan. This is where the Pushmo series quietly wrapped up its legacy, at least for now. Released in 2015 on the 3DS, it was the fourth and final game in the series, and while it didn't make the biggest splash, it was actually one of the most inventive and mechanically rich puzzle games Nintendo ever put out. At first glance, Stretchmo looks familiar. Mallow's back, the blocky art style is intact, and the goal is still to reach the top of the puzzle structures by manipulating the environment. But from the first level, you'll notice something new. Blocks can now be stretched, pulled out like in Pushmo, sure, but also expanded horizontally and vertically, growing in size like puffy marshmallows. The new mechanic fundamentally transforms the gameplay, and the puzzles become moldable objects. And here's where things get interesting. You don't just buy the game, you start with a short demo called Mallow's Playtime Plaza. Then, like in Rusty's Real Deal Baseball, you're prompted to purchase additional puzzle packs. If you bought these all as a bundle, it would just be $10, but the pricing model is just kind of weird and could have turned people off. Nintendo could have just made this a $10 game and no one would have been upset about it. The best puzzles, especially in the later packs, require you to manipulate blocks in 3 directions at once while planning for how those manipulations will affect surrounding structures. And when it clicks, it really clicks. Like, you start seeing the puzzles as a moldable object, like playing with clay. You're creating footholds, carving tunnels, building stairs. Stretchmo is divided up more like a theme park than a linear game. Mallow's Playtime Plaza is your first real test after the demo with 100 levels, and it's pretty accessible at first and slowly layers in the stretch mechanic. Then Poppy's Sculpture Square, which is pretty visually stunning for a 3DS game, and each puzzle is built in the shape of animals, food, objects, or Nintendo characters. Less about crushing your brain and more about appreciating the artistry, but still a legit challenge. Corrin's Fortress of Fun is where things get serious. Some of the hardest puzzles in the entire series: trap blocks, spikes, retracting blocks, and massive multi-step stretching puzzles. And then Papa Block's NES Expo, which is a love letter to Nintendo fans, where you climb 8-bit renditions of Mario, Link, Samus, and more, and they're all rendered in stretchable blocks. The Donkey Kong level looked like classic arcade DK, but had barrel-shaped puzzles that force you to stretch and retract in alternating patterns to avoid spikes. The amount of personality packed into this collection was actually insane. Completing all 4 paid packs unlocked the Perilous Peak, which was basically a brutal bonus gauntlet. It wasn't any themes or gimmicks, it was just literally hardcore puzzle design. But then after this game, there was silence. Stretch was the last we saw of Mallow in his own game. There was no Switch port, no Stretchmo Deluxe, no physical releases. Just a great finale that's now unpurchasable because the 3DS and Wii U eShop shut down. Your only way to play these games now are by unofficial means or purchasing a 3DS with and downloaded, or a Wii U with Pushmo World. Some digital games I understand why Nintendo's in no rush to re-release, like, Rusty's Real Deal Baseball or Nintendo Badgercade, because they feel more like a product of their time. But the Pushmo series was just such a unique and well-made collection of games that could easily be ported to the Switch, whether through the eShop or even a physical copy with all 4 games. The Switch 2 has been out for a year now, and I'm still holding out hope that we get a physical copy of these games someday. And while Intelligent Systems was making Pushmo, HAL Laboratory, the people behind Kirby, were making their own weird little puzzle eShop game. It looked nothing alike, and it was basically a black and white square, but somehow became one of Nintendo's most charming things in that whole era, and that was BoxBoy. So this is an interesting series, and I think one of the most interesting things about it is it actually has the rarest amiibo that goes for over $400 now. But anyway, we'll get to that. So at first glance, it doesn't look like much. In fact, it looked like the exact opposite of much. Black and white visuals, a pixel box is the main character, a name that sounded like a knockoff action figure, but for people who actually downloaded it, it was a really intuitive game. The series was developed by HAL Laboratory, the same folks who gave us Kirby and Super Smash Bros. HAL's design has always been about implementing their own really unique ideas. I mean, when you're led by Masahiro Sakurai, you're going to implement some great ideas. With Kirby, it was, what if a pink puffball could copy enemies and float around? With Smash, it was, what if a fighting game wasn't about combos, but chaos? And with BoxBoy, the question was even simpler. What if a box could make more boxes? Boxception. That's it. That's literally the entire mechanic here. BoxBoy's protagonist, QB, can create strings of boxes from his own body. He could toss them, use them as bridges, stack them to hit switches, protect himself from lasers, hook himself around ledges, hang from ceilings, walk midair, and over time, the game challenges you to use that mechanic in increasingly clever ways. Released in April 2015 exclusively for the 3DS eShop, BoxBoy did not make headlines. No commercials, no E3 demo booths. It just sort of appeared. And at first glance, it looked like a free-to-play mobile game, but appearances were the point. The game is entirely black and white. There's no 3D models and no textures. It's just line art. Clean but very simple, and it kind of feels like a Game Boy style game with clear graphics. But here's the twist. It's not an easy game. BoxBoy quickly teaches you how to make boxes in a line. You can only make a certain number at once, say 4 boxes at a time. And once you place them, they're gone until you reset. The beauty is in how the game forces you to think creatively within that limitation. You might need to build an L-shaped to activate a switch while standing on another, or dangle a set of boxes over a ledge to hook around and climb, or make a line of boxes to block lasers while timing a jump through a collapsing platform. Every level is pretty bite-sized, and it's a little like how Pushmo was. Nintendo really seemed to love their quirky boxing puzzle games around this time. Each one feels different, and most pose a good challenge. Not impossible, but always asking you to think just a little differently than the last time. The pacing is near perfect. Now, mechanics are introduced constantly, but never all at once. Conveyor belts, portals, time switches, gravity reversals, and BoxBoy never over-explains anything. They just trust you to learn by doing, to try, fail, and eventually get that aha moment. There's also no live system, there's no death penalty, there's no stress, it's quiet, and it's a rewarding game. And then as for the main character, QB, he has no mouth, he has no voice, he doesn't jump high, he doesn't do anything flashy. He's a square, no offense, but he's got personality. He's not designed to be a mascot, he's designed to be a blank canvas, and that's what makes him so weirdly lovable. Not through lore or backstory, just through simplicity. HAL somehow created one of Nintendo's most unique modern characters by doing almost nothing, and it absolutely worked. A year later in 2016, we got BoxBoy. HAL took the core mechanic and said, what if you could spawn 2 sets of boxes before resetting? Nintendo was really thinking outside the box here. It sounds like a small change, but it's really not. One set of boxes might become a platform while the second becomes a barrier, or maybe one helps you hit a switch while the other becomes a bridge for your actual body to get across. Instead of solving the puzzle in one linear move, you're layering mechanics, using multiple sets of boxes for different purposes, sometimes in parallel. This so quietly expanded the world. QB has friends now, other box-shaped beings who wave at him from the menu screens, and it was just a nice addition to make the game feel less lonely. The third game in the series is arguably its most ambitious. It's Bye Bye BoxBoy. It actually takes the formula somewhere pretty new. You still get one set of boxes per use, but there's special box types that change everything. Warp boxes that let you teleport from one point to another, bomb boxes that explode after a delay, breaking walls and opening new paths, remote boxes that can be detached and moved independently, and rocket boxes that shoot QB through the air like a cube-shaped missile. And then there's the story. Bye Bye BoxBoy gives QB a more overarching narrative. Like, the game opens with QB discovering tiny baby QBs called Q-Babies who need to be escorted to safety. And yeah, this game adds escort missions, and somehow they're good. These baby boxes follow you, but they're vulnerable. They can't touch spikes or lasers, and they don't jump, so your boxes become shields, bridges, and lifelines to keep them alive. And then comes the ending, which is a very beautiful, bittersweet, subtle ending that lives up to the title. It really felt like the end, but we did get one more game. However, before that, I want to talk about the BoxBoy amiibo. It was released exclusively in Japan. It came with a soundtrack and physical copy of the BoxBoy games for around the equivalent of like $28 US, which is a really good deal for 3 games plus an amiibo. Nowadays, most amiibo cost more than that. However, unless you got this like 9 years ago, it's not exactly that easy to come across. In fact, if you want to buy this, it's going to cost you this much. Anyway, back to the games. So after a 2-year silence, in 2019, QB made the leap to the Nintendo Switch in a full proper HD release called BoxBoy plus Box Girl. This was the moment fans had been waiting for. The series finally on another system instead of being exclusive to an outdated console. The core gameplay is still there, but the headline feature is co-op multiplayer. For the first time ever, you and a friend can play as QB and QC and solve puzzles together. The game also includes a solo campaign, as well as a full third campaign called A Tall Tale, where you play as Cutie, a tall rectangular character built around longer box shapes. So there's 3 full-length campaigns, brand new HD visuals, and this game isn't revolutionary, but it's a welcome addition to the series. And this is the only game in the entire video that's digital only that you can still buy nowadays. Everything else is either gone or locked to hardware nobody's making anymore. So 4 games later, let's ask the real question. Why did this little box matter? Why do some of us remember BoxBoy so fondly while most people barely know he exists? The game is entirely black and white because it wants your brain to focus on shapes and movements, not the visuals. Despite being so visually plain, there's something kind of cozy about the game, and I don't really know how to explain it. It's also just a very nice and positive series, with QBs helping others land safely, the high five at the end of a co-op stage with Box Girl, just no drama here. Outside his own games, QB's only major crossover appearance are Costume in Kirby Planet Robobot, unlockable with the amiibo, and a Spirit in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. That's pretty much his whole legacy since then. And like with Pushmo, it's sad that the series never got the mainstream love it deserved. Even if we never get another BoxBoy game though, the 4 we already have never once sold out its core ideas, and that's more than a lot of franchises can say. So while BoxBoy is a pretty simple idea, that same year, Nintendo released something that was a much weirder idea. In 2015, Nintendo released a unique strategy game for the 3DS called Codename S.T.E.A.M. On the surface, it sounded like a fairly standard turn-based tactics title, but what really set it apart was its absolutely bonkers premise. The game features none other than Abraham Lincoln leading a team of characters from classic literature and folklore to fight off an alien invasion. This was all set in a steampunk comic book world, and yeah, Honest Abe versus aliens with a squad of heroes pulled from books and legends. Adventures don't get much more bizarre than that. Codename S.T.E.A.M was first unveiled at E3 2014 during a Nintendo developer event. The game was developed by Intelligent Systems, so we already talked about with the Pushmo series. Of course, they also made Fire Emblem and Advance Wars. The strategy fans immediately took notice of this. But instead of a new entry in those beloved series, Nintendo was showing off a brand new IP with a stylized Western comic book vibe. The title S.T.E.A.M stands for Strike Team Eliminating the Alien Menace. Initial fan reactions were mixed, to put it mildly. Some people were intrigued that the Fire Emblem devs were trying something so new, and others were hoping for a revival of other dormant franchises. When the games got announced, the internet was flooded with comments like, "Where's Golden Sun? Where's Advance Wars?" After that E3 reveal, the general hype among Nintendo fans was pretty mild, with a lot of folks simply just not knowing what to make out of the strange project. Nintendo clearly recognized the uncertainty, because in early 2015, they dropped a substantial free demo on the 3DS eShop to get people on board. This demo offered multiple missions, almost 90 minutes of gameplay, and gave players a taste of the settings and mechanics. It was an unusual move for Nintendo, and it felt like a sign that they knew they had to sell this concept to players. Behind the scenes, the developers had interesting motivations. Intelligent Systems producer Hitoshi Yamagami had been thinking about why some players shy away from strategy games. His conclusion was that traditional turn-based games put too much abstraction between the player and the action. So the solution? Make a strategy game that feels more immediate by borrowing elements from shooters. It was designed to play like XCOM or Valkyrie Chronicles, which is a tactical game but viewed right over your character's shoulder instead of from a distant overhead map. On top of that, the team wrapped the whole thing in a stylized comic book presentation, taking inspiration from Silver Age American comics. The devs specifically cited Jack Kirby and Bruce Timm as influences, and to add one more layer, many of the alien designs were inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft. Yes, there's a dash of Cthulhu in here. This game had ambition. Like, Nintendo was taking a genuine swing at something weird, and North America got this game on March 13th, 2015, with Europe following in May. So let's talk a little more about the premise, because I don't think I explained it enough yet. It's set in an alternate history steampunk version of the late 19th century. The story kicks off in London during a grand world fair, celebrating steam technology. Without warning, aliens invade the city, monstrous tentacled Lovecraftian beasts come out of portals and are attacking civilians, and the Japanese title even includes the subtitle Lincoln vs. Aliens, which honestly might be a better sales pitch than Codename Steam. As chaos engulfs London, Abraham Lincoln arrives. In this universe, Lincoln wasn't assassinated at Ford's Theater. He survived or faked his death and had been secretly organizing a task force to defend Earth from extraterrestrial threats. He swoops into London aboard a flying steampunk ship and conscripts a pair of American soldiers, Henry Fleming and John Henry, into his new unit. This elite squad is the titular S.T.E.A.M, and their mission is to repel the alien invasion. From there, Lincoln travels the world recruiting more heroes, and this is where the game's wildly creative character roster comes in. Intelligent Systems essentially created their own version of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, pulling heroes from American literature and folklore, especially those in the public domain, and imagining them as steampunk action heroes. Henry Fleming is the protagonist of Stephen Crane's Civil War novel, The Red Badge of Courage. John Henry, the African-American folk legend known for hammering through rock, carries a massive steam-powered hammer as his weapon. Tiger Lily from Peter Pan is reimagined as a Native American princess turned warrior, wielding healing powers and a very large sniper rifle. Tom Sawyer shows up as a crafty rifleman, apparently trading in fence painting for alien fighting. 3 characters from The Wonderful Wizard of Oz join Steam too: the Cowardly Lion, the Tin Man, and Scarecrow. With the Lion now is a brawler with a jetpack that lets him leap into enemies' faces for close combat. For Moby Dick, Tweekeg the Harpooner deploys mechanical penguin bombs that waddle towards enemies and explode, because I mean, why not at this point? Representing the Lovecraft influence is Randolph Carter, depicted here as a knowledgeable librarian turned soldier who can bewilder enemies with eldritch tricks. There's also Califia, based on the mythic queen from a 16th century Spanish novel. The fun fact is the namesake of California. And here she's a powerful warrior queen wielding explosives. And rounding out this roster is the Fox, a sly vigilante character inspired by old frontier stories. So there's 12 playable characters by the end of this campaign. It's a cast as diverse and off the wall as you can imagine. One mission you might be storming a castle with Tom Sawyer, Tiger Lily, and the Cowardly Lion. The next, Queequeg and Scarecrow are backing up Henry Fleming in the streets of London. And President Lincoln himself, he plays mission commander for most of the game, and you get briefed by a stately, bearded Lincoln between missions. But at pivotal moments, he busts out of a giant steam-powered mech suit called the ABE, which stands for Anthropomorphized Battle Engine, which is shaped like a huge robotic Abraham Lincoln. In these sequences, Lincoln literally joins the battle by piloting his mech and punching giant alien bosses. The visual of the 16th US president and a mecha trading blows with a Lovecraftian monster atop Big Ben is something you really have to see to believe. Nintendo also threw in amiibo support. By tapping the Marth, Ike, Lucina, or Robin amiibo on a new 3DS, you could summon those Fire Emblem heroes into the game as playable characters. You could technically have Marth and Ike fighting aliens alongside Abraham Lincoln and Tiger Lily, and the game explains this as plucking heroes from other dimensions. Fire Emblem characters are actually quite strong allies, though if they died in battle, you'd have to rescan the amiibo to bring them back, adding a bit of Fire Emblem permadeath tension. So let's talk about how this game actually plays. It blends turn-based strategy with third-person shooter elements in a way that was pretty novel for a Nintendo title. If you've ever played Sega's Valkyrie Chronicles or the modern XCOM games, you'll probably have a general idea what this is. You control a squad of up to 4 agents on 3D battlefields, taking turns moving and attacking, and then the aliens take their turn. The twist is that all your actions are governed by your character's steam. Each agent carries a boiler that generates a certain amount of steam per turn. Moving your characters forward a few steps consumes a couple units, and firing a weapon consumes more depending on the weapon's cost. Run out of steam, and that character can't move or attack until the next turn when the boilers refill. This creates a constant tactical balance. You want to cover ground and grab objectives, but you also need to save enough steam for combat. The steam system system also enables Overwatch attacks.
Say that again?
Which are crucial. Certain weapons allow a character to automatically fire at an enemy during the enemy's turn if you've left enough steam in reserve. These reactive shots can stun enemies and halt their movement. Both you and the aliens can use Overwatch, so positioning your team to take advantage of ambushes and avoiding obvious enemy sightlines becomes a key part of the strategy. Unlike a traditional strategy RPG with a top-down grid, you're down in the trenches here. You move each character in third-person view, manually aiming your weapons in a behind-the-shoulder perspective. Enemies have glowing weak points that flash, encouraging careful aim for bonus damage. The bigger adjustment for most players was just learning to fight without an overhead map. You can't see the whole layout or enemy positions from above, so you actually have to scout around by physically looking with your character's viewpoints. You can switch between your squad members' perspectives on the fly, essentially using one agent to peek around a corner while another watches their back. Some critics felt this made the game unnecessarily blind and encouraged painfully slow inch-by-inch movement. Others argued it was a fresh change that forced players to use line-of-sight and memory. Each hero comes with a unique primary weapon that suits their personality. John Henry's launcher lobs bear-shaped explosives in an arc, great for hitting enemies behind cover. Tiger Lily's basic gun can heal teammates from a distance. The Lion's default weapon does extra damage when hitting an enemy's weak point. Characters can also equip a secondary sub-weapon of your choosing, unlocked by collecting medals during missions, ranging from standard grenades to quirky tools like the banana bolt, which launches banana peels that cause aliens to slip and slide. Each character also has a once per mission special attack. Quick Kick fires a giant harpoon that can skewer multiple enemies in a line. The Cowardly Lion unleashes a roaring area of effect that hits all nearby foes. We have to talk about the game's most infamous flaw, which is the enemy turn times. In the initial release, when you ended your turn and the aliens began theirs, you often had to endure seriously long waits. Since you can't see the aliens unless one of your characters has line of sight, you mostly just sit there just staring while hearing the creatures shuffle around somewhere in the level. This could go on for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, sometimes even more if there were lots of aliens active. It disrupted the pacing badly. Like you're all keyed up from a tense skirmish, you hit end turn, and then you twiddle your thumbs listening to footsteps and growls in the darkness. There was a ton of blowback from this. Polygon's initial review was extremely harsh, in large part due to this issue. The reviewer called the game misguided, and he admitted he couldn't even finish it before reviewing. To Nintendo's credit, they moved fast. Within a month of the North American launch, a free update added a fast forward feature for enemy turns. Holding a button would speed up the aliens' movements to roughly double the speed on a regular 3DS, and even faster than the new 3DS. That Polygon reviewer actually updated his score from a 3.5 to a 6 after the patch, noting that it made the change a lot easier to recommend. It's unfortunate that this issue marred launch, because once you get past it, the game underneath it is actually worth talking about. And also, I just want to say I didn't play this game at launch, I played it later, so I never had to endure these wait times, but I can definitely understand why that would cause someone to want to stop playing. So critically, Codename S.T.E.A.M landed in like the middle of the road territory, around like a 67 to 69 on Metacritic. Some reviewers really liked the game's depth and its ideas, but a lot of others didn't like how unpredictable it was, and didn't like the lack of map or radar, and argued that the level designs didn't do enough. Commercially, Codename S.T.E.A.M was, to put it bluntly, a flop. In Japan, it sold over 1,900 copies in its first week, which is shockingly low. In North America and Europe, it never became a big talking point, and retailers were discounting it not long after release. Like, if you want to get this game now, you can literally get it for under $10 with shipping included in that price. Part of the issue was timing and competition. By summer 2015, Fire Emblem Fates came out in Japan and drew all the attention of strategy fans. S.T.E.A.M was an odd newcomer trying to appeal to a niche while also trying to appeal to a broader action audience, and it just kind of fell into no man's land between the two. In Smash Ultimate, Henry Fleming appears as a collectible spirit, and a few of the game's music tracks are included in Smash's massive soundtrack. It's a nice nod to fans and a way of saying, hey, we remember this game existed. Among those who did buy and play it, you'll find a small but passionate group who call it an underrated gem and lament that nobody bought it. After all, it's a fully functional strategy game with a lot of content, a 16-mission campaign, bonus unlockable missions, online multiplayer modes. The fast forward patch also means anyone playing it now won't experience its worst flaw the way early adopters did. If you're into strategy games and you have a 3DS, definitely worth picking up a copy of this, because unlike most of the games I've talked about in this video so far, there is that physical copy, and that's part of why physical media is so important. And I'm recording this a day after Sony made the announcement that they're going to cease making physical copies, and this is just one of the many reasons why it's so important. So those are all the games that I made dedicated videos on, but I actually want to cover a few more here. The first of those I want to talk about, released in 2013 by Game Freak. Yeah, the Pokemon people. They made a game called HarmoKnight, and it was a rhythm platformer where everything moved to the beat. It got decent reviews, had a small fan base, and it actually came out earlier in Japan before reaching the West the following year. Most of the game runs on 2 buttons. B jumps, A swings your staff, and every level auto scrolls in time with the music. So you're not really reacting to obstacles so much as catching a beat, hitting enemies, and floating drum plants on rhythm to rack up notes. A few stretches hand control to other characters entirely, like there's Lyra who shoots enemies from a distance and can slide under stuff. Chico and Simbi just smash straight through everything in their paths with drums strapped to them. Some sections drop you into a minecart where the tempo keeps shifting under you and the D-pad comes into play. Boss fights throw out a pattern and make you repeat it back. The whole thing exists because Game Freak changed how it let people pitch new projects around that time. You find 2 coworkers who like your idea, get 3 months to prototype it, 3 more to prove it's worth finishing, and if it survives all of that, it becomes a real game. HarmoKnight is the first thing that system ever produced, and the guy behind it isn't even Japanese. His name's James Turner, and he's British, but had been living in Japan for over a decade at that point. His earliest idea wasn't even a rhythm game. He just wanted the simplest possible action platformer with 1 button, something anyone could pick up, and the rhythm side only showed up once he started figuring out how to make that simple action feel satisfying. They almost didn't put Pokemon music in it either. This whole bonus stage is built around Pokemon tracks, and the team was apparently nervous about it, worried it would feel wrong hearing a Pokemon song show up in a completely unrelated world with a kid named Tempo running around a planet called Melodia. They tried 1 song as a test to see if it worked, and it did, so they kept going. Then Game Freak went right back to making Pokemon games, and HarmoKnight got demoted to Smash Trophy and Spirit Tier Deep Cut. It's actually a pretty solid game. I just never see anyone talk about it. Like, I've seen more people talk about Pushmo, about BoxBoy, even about codename S.T.E.A.M, but if you have a modded 3DS, this is definitely a game you should try out if it sounds interesting to you. Now that's just 1 game, but there's a whole other series I haven't talked about, and that's Dillon'S Rolling Western. This started in 2012, and you play as an armadillo cowboy who rolls into rock monsters to protect frontier villages. So being honest, I didn't play this, and I was never really interested in this series, and I didn't even know it got 3 games until somewhat recently. The third of which actually came out during the Switch era on the 3DS, but I'll get to that. So in Dillon'S Rolling Western, you start in a village called Beginsville, and it's 10 villages total, 3 in-game days each. The days are for exploring and gathering, mining ore and gems for money and materials, and separately collecting things called scruffles, which grow the population of scrugs. The sheep-like livestock the entire game is actually built around protecting. That money funds gun towers you place around the village, and then the sun goes down and the groks, not to be confused with grok, show up. And it's on you and those towers to keep them off the scrogs. There's real variety packed into the enemy design too. Vegigroks disguise themselves as ordinary scruffle plants, so you can walk right into one thinking you're just gathering resources. By the later villages, some groks start wearing masks that block your normal attacks completely until you find a way to knock the mask off first. The bosses actually escalate a lot more than I thought they would. A boss grok shows up on day 2 of a village called Cinchville. It's a giant red variant that ignores your towers completely and just charges straight at you like he has a vendetta against you. By River Delta, later in the game, that gets replaced with something called a Dire Grok. That's a tougher version of the same fight, and the actual final boss, the Ultima Grok, breaks every rule the game had taught you up until that point. You normally have to shoot it down with your own towers. If it gets close enough to the village before you finish it off, your sidekick Russ gives you one last shot by throwing something called the Victory Charm at it. Only then does it open its mouth and you climb inside to fight the actual core while it summons smaller Groks and drops pillars to block you from hitting it. Also, someone comment how many times I ended up saying Grok in some form here. Anyway, it launched at just $9.99, and reviews were decent. They weren't great or anything, but the one complaint that showed up over and over is the same one. It had a strong first half, but then once you've learned that loop, the back half just didn't really do enough to build on that. And also, Dillon almost wasn't an armadillo, and this wasn't even a Nintendo original. The pitch started as a Zelda spinoff built around Gorons, you know, the rock people from the series who can crawl into a ball and roll everywhere, and the developer Vanpool actually built a working prototype of it. The director was apparently so excited about the pitch, he wrote an entire theme song for it called My Goron Song. Nintendo turned down the Goron idea, but liked the rolling itself enough to tell Vanpool to keep that part and build a new character around it. The rolling mechanic goes even back further than that too. Vanpool lifted it from a slingshot boss fight in one of their own earlier Tingle games, and if you don't know about the Tingle games, I actually have an upcoming video where I'm going to talk about that a little bit, so be sure to subscribe for that. Not long after, in 2013, we would get the sequel, The Last Ranger, at $10.99. It's the same core loop, but you're not doing it alone this time. You can recruit AI allies as you move from town to town. Gallo, a lizard gunman, Boone, a bear who hits really heavy but has to fully heal up before he'll actually fight again, which I guess is both a strength and a liability depending on when he decides to sit out, and Nomad, a squid sniper who speaks an entire different language than the rest of the cast. Translated for you, but apparently gibberish to everyone else in his own world. Side note, what's your favorite Nintendo game where a squid could have a sniper and speaks a weird language? Sometimes also throw a train into the mix, which you now have to defend on top of the usual village gates, so there are 2 things that can fail instead of just one. It's a real expansion of the original in a lot of ways. More content and more moving pieces than the first game had. It added more, but reviewers still had the same core complaint about it. Once you'd learned that loop, you just repeated it over and over again, and this game just didn't really change that much. And then when it seemed like the series was dead, in 2018, we got the final game, Dillon'S Dead Heatbreakers. So 2018 was obviously a year into the Switch era, and this came out on the 3DS, which kind of doomed it from the start. But let's talk about the actual game. The Western setting is gone completely. It's swapped for a post-apocalyptic wasteland that producer Tanabe has said was closer to Mad Max in tone, and the game apparently started life as a pure racing title before the old tower defense got folded back into can do it. You're no longer working entirely through Dillon. Your Mii gets transformed into one of 10 possible animal forms called an Amimal, however you pronounce this, who handles jobs and hiring around a hub called the City and joins Dillon's larger team. Though you still directly control Dillon himself during the main invasions, and those invasions escalate in stages now. The Groks attack on foot first, then their mothership transforms them into vehicles that race down the road to you. Then in the final stage, they go fully superpowered and just charge the base directly. So again, like the first two games, it wasn't something people raved about. It was something that people said was a good game, but I will give it credit that it did change things up from the first game. I mean, adding vehicles to this is cool. So for those of you who are big Dillon fans, unfortunately, the studio that made this game, Vanpool, shut down in 2023. They built the minigames in Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. They worked on the Tingle games on the DS. They also helped HAL Laboratory on some of the modern Kirby games. But it's always sad to see a developer that's made great things like the Tingle games have to shut down. And as for Dillon himself, he was an assist trophy in Smash, but that's pretty much the last we've seen of him, and we probably will not see him again. Now, one more thing before we wrap up this video, because it might be the saddest example in this whole video of Nintendo trying something new and picking the worst possible moment to do it. Ever Oasis came out on the 3DS in June 2017, 4 months after the Switch had already launched. You play a seedling named Tethu or Tethi, whose brother Nor runs his own Oasis until chaos-corrupted monsters destroyed in the opening minutes. Tethu escapes, meets Esna, the last surviving water spirit in the desert, and together they plant the seed for a brand new Oasis from scratch. The director Koichi Ishii created the entire Mana series, starting with Final Fantasy Adventure in 1991, and is also credited with designing the Chocobo and the Moogle for Final Fantasy. This was his first major directing role in over a decade, and Grezzo, the studio he founded, was mainly known for working on Nintendo's existing franchises, especially the 3DS Zelda games, the remakes of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, Triforce Heroes, some of the StreetPass games already covered earlier in this video, but Ever Oasis was its first major original RPG, and its biggest chance yet to build a world and cast that was entirely theirs. Each of the other three tribes has its own settlements somewhere out in the desert, and you have to physically reach them before their members start becoming available. The Circus settlement leads into the surrounding caves and eventually the ocean necropolis, full of boulders that only their hammers can smash through. There's the Lagora settlement, which is hidden deeper within the Kalari Woodsea, and many of the major dungeons feel a lot like Zelda. Hidden inside giant pots scattered across the map with environmental puzzles, lock routes, different tools, and larger areas that build towards a fight. What tribe member you have in your party actually can change what you can reach in a given room. So a locked-off shortcut in one dungeon might be like a 5-second detour with the right person along and a total dead end without them. And then there's also a real story here underneath the cute art style, and it gets darker than you'd expect. Nor actually survives the opening attack, but Chaos corrupts him and turns him evil. And also, spoiler alert, the figure working against you for most of the game. The game doesn't reveal this immediately either, like it gives you time to figure it out. I don't know, it's just a cool twist. But anyway, back to the game itself. You recruit grow shops called Bloom Boots, which sell goods to your other residents, and to Newts, which are strange penguin-like visitors who regularly pass through. They don't really say anything and apparently have zero self-control around a well-stocked shop. And the other three tribes don't run boots themselves, but you can recruit them as party members and send them out on expeditions instead. Holding the right kind of festival can help attract more of a specific tribe too. Circa are drawn to gourmet festivals, Drak to fashion festivals, Lagora to novelty festivals. So there's actually a lot of town management stuff here, which I thought was really cool because I wasn't expecting it. It even goes more in depth with how much you earn per day. And overall, this was a really solid RPG. Reviews landed pretty positively for it, but the big knock on it was that the combat and dungeons underneath it were all too simple to carry a full RPG on their own. But for me, I don't really mind some simple RPG mechanics, and I thought this did enough. Now, there's a good chance you've never even heard of this game, but it actually got a physical release. But again, I've said this before, it came out on the 3DS post-Switch launch, so it was kind of doomed from the start. Ishii said he chose the 3DS over the Switch on purpose because more people still owned a 3DS and the stereoscopic 3D effect suited the desert setting. Like, yeah, that was technically true that more people had a 3DS at the time, but most people were already adopting the Switch and didn't care about 3DS's releases at this point. Plus, the 3D effect was never popular to begin with. By 2017, Nintendo literally released a new version of the 2DS because people didn't care about the 3D. This is a game I could actually see having a pretty dedicated fan base if it came to Switch or Switch 2, because I think fundamentally it's a really interesting game. I think it's a fun game, but it wasn't really given a real chance and it's been locked to the 3DS ever since. So I know this was a very long video and I appreciate if you watched this entire thing. And if you did and aren't subscribed, be sure to do so because I think I might make a video like this on Nintendo Switch games. Plus I have so many other videos that if you like this entire thing, I'm sure there'll be something else you like. Also be sure to join my Discord and I'll see you next time.